Hi, everyone. Welcome back to A Little More Inspired. On today's episode, I will be diving into The Three Voices of God by Matthew Kelly. It's this amazing book that I've been reading. It's only 3 chapters, but each chapter is filled with like a lot of knowledge and a lot of like wisdom. So I think I'm going to do an episode for each chapter just because I thought that each chapter was like really impactful and could be really helpful, and I don't want to like limit myself. Basically, this book is about the idea of like listening to the three voices of God, and really it's like your intuition and listening to that inner voice. And Matthew Kelly is a devout Catholic, so this is coming from his perspective of his faith. But, like I said, you can learn from everyone. And I thought that, and if you're not Catholic, like I think this is just like a really amazing book. You get to the core of it, it's just pure knowledge and wisdom. In the first chapter, we're going to be diving into the concepts of misliving your life. And I think that everybody might feel that way at some point, especially if we have been living in the shoulds of life and making decisions that aren't always for our best interest. Sometimes we can get comfortable and not change and not make good choices, or we're just kind of coasting through sometimes what's comfortable. And then one day we wake up and we're like, oh, well, I'm not really happy with where I am, but we weren't really courageous enough to change our lives or to make choices that really would benefit our like soul and spirit. Idea of a misspent life. A misspent life isn't limited to stereotypes like those lost in crime, addiction. It's a universal possibility that can happen to anyone, regardless of background or choice. Suddenly missing out, missing your life doesn't really require dramatic or drastic actions. It can happen in mundane, unnoticed ways, so subtle that even the people closest to you may not see it. Often this goes unnoticed because we surround ourselves with others who are also misliving their life in a similar way. We tend to surround ourselves with people who have similar values and are on like the same vibration as us. So if we're living our life unconsciously, then most likely we're surrounded by people who are also living their life unconsciously, because anybody who is not living their life unconsciously would trigger you. And like the idea of like growing, like being around them would make you uncomfortable, because like it's like your body would signal to you like it's time for me to make changes, or maybe I'm not growing. And sometimes I think that we think that the only way that you can mislive your life is if you're doing like really bad stuff. That if like nothing really bad is happening in your life, then you don't really think like, oh, I'm misliving my life. It can just feel like this feeling of discontent that we can't really explain. I feel like most people live with like this low level of dissatisfaction. And sometimes we're too like cowardly to like make decisions that would radically change our mind, because either we're like too dependent on outside sources that like are making us believe that this is where we have to be. He says that the recipe for a misspent life is not about one major mistake, but the steady accumulation of mediocrity, laziness, procrastination, obsession with material possessions, and self centeredness. These habits quietly pull away from living a truly fulfilling life. We often wander carelessly through life as if a well lived life were guaranteed, and it isn't. After I read this section, I really reflected on like how I feel, how I've lived my life. Do I feel like I've been making conscious decisions? And I think that I was misliving my life because I was making decisions that I thought would make other people happy. And then like I woke up one day and I felt like I was like dying inside. It took like a lot of courage, to take my power back and say like, I don't want anybody telling me what to do anymore. And I want to do what feels right in my soul. And what is right for me might not be right for my parents or my siblings or anybody who thinks that they know me. And I feel like when I was in San Diego, I felt like I was living my life kind of misspent because even though I was having like so much fun surrounded by lots of people, I don't really think that I was like making like good decisions for like my future. I think that I was really focused on having a good time, that like I wasn't thinking about my purpose and what actually like is good for me and my future, and like, these things that sometimes in our youth we don't really ponder on because we're so stuck in the moment. But there really does come a time where you just like kind of have to let that stuff go to make decisions that feel like you're actually living for a purpose. I think that sometimes if you have lost yourself in that world, it can feel like it can be hard to find your way back. And recovering your path can feel overwhelming and intimidating. It's undeniably challenging. There's no sugarcoating it, but it also is entirely possible. No matter how far you've strayed, if this resonates with where you are today, please hold on to hope that you can start anew. I think that realizing that no matter how far you've strayed from a path of purpose, you can always find your way back. I think that sometimes we think that we can't and that we're kind of stuck in our ways and that this is just the way that we are. And because like this life is hard and most of the time nobody's teaching us good how to make good decisions, and most of our families are trapped in traumas that they're passing along to us, and so it can feel like kind of daunting, but I personally believe that there's hope, that you can always change your life, that you can always decide to turn around and take a new path if that is what you like. But I do believe that it's like radical choices, and I think that a lot of the times you hear people saying that they want to change but they can never really commit to that choice. That can be really difficult for people who are lost in the illusions. Like I've realized that like most people want to be in illusions. They like being in whatever fantasy world that they're in, and they don't want you to break the bubble of the fantasy that they've created. In most of the spiritual books that I've read, especially like in the Eckhart Tolle, he talks about how most people are like walking around kind of asleep, and everybody has like this veil of illusion. And a spiritual awakening is like the first one that you ever have, is basically that veil breaking and you finally seeing the reality of the choices that you've made, and that maybe you've been peer pressured, but at the end of the day, like you made those final choices to be where you are, and you're kind of snatched out of like that victimhood. And it's really sad that like most people, they don't wake up from that illusion until literally like the moment that they die. They have this moment and they realize that they've like mislived lived their life, that they haven't made good choices, that they've hurt a lot of people, or that they've left a path that um they didn't feel was meaningful, or that they didn't leave their mark in this world. He was saying that like only like 10% of the world like wakes up from that illusion. I really feel like now it definitely was a process to move out of like the world of illusions, but once you're like fully grounded in yourself, I personally feel like it makes life a lot easier to not live in the illusion. You start to make better decisions and there's like less chaos, even though like you feel sometimes that people that are living in illusions are like having so much fun and like in all of this pleasure and overindulging. But really there's a lot of chaos there that they're not sharing, and there's a lot of like deep rooted darkness that they're not sharing, and everybody's kind of chasing this high. Mastery in life comes from mastering our choices. And I think that every spiritual book that I've ever read talks about like being a master at making decisions. That's why I feel like it's important to have like, not your life should be of solitude, but like dedicating time to be alone and really thinking about the things that you're doing and the intentions behind everything that you do. Because if you don't look at the intentions behind every decision that you make, every decision could be rooted by a trauma or a selfish desire or somebody else like planting that in you, and it like really isn't coming like genuinely from you or for the right reasons. And so cultivating like a spiritual life is really about becoming conscious in our everyday decisions so that we're not just like running around with this blindfold, and then feeling like victimized because we feel like we're not in control. I think that a lot of the times people hold on to illusions because they feel like that's control, but really they're out of control. So build your tomorrow with choices you make today. Envision the person God created you to become and work steadily towards that vision, one thoughtful decision at a time. Take inventory of your life. Is your life whispering wisdom or cursing at the world and everyone in it? If you had to summarize your life in one word, what would you say? Would you say it's full of love, generosity, thoughtful, responsible, irresponsible, light, dark, righteous, sarcastic, hypocritical, degenerate, goodness, kindness, thoughtless, careless, anxious, depressed, truth, beauty, or wisdom? Yeah, the other day my friend was telling me that I really needed to find three new adjectives to describe myself, because I think that before I always used to describe myself as somebody who was sweet and emotional and sensitive. And she asked me the other day, she was like, "Is that who you really are? Did somebody tell you that you're those things and you just kind of held on to it?" And she was like, "I want you to go home and think of three new adjectives to describe yourself as, because as your friend who knows you, like I wouldn't describe you as those three things." And I was like, "Really? Am I not a super emotional person? Am I not like super sensitive?" And she was like, "I don't think that you're any of those things." She was like, "I think that you're strong and I think that you're genuine and sincere, but I wouldn't describe you as sweet, sensitive, and emotional." And I was like, she was like, "I think that people have used that as a way to disarm you and kind of gaslight you into like accepting bad behavior, or gaslighting you into not acknowledging how you actually feel." I feel like I really resonated with his suggestion of summarizing your life in one word, because sometimes we've been told who we are and we've just accepted it and we've just kind of ran with it. But if we really sat and like took inventory of our life, and maybe those adjectives were true at one point in your life, but like what kind of new adjectives would you like to be? Or what are the real adjectives that you feel like you truly are, but nobody's ever really noticed? I think that that's like a really thoughtful way of like realizing how conscious you are about how you're living your life, and if you feel like you're proud of the decisions that you've been making. So then he goes on to talk about how God speaks to everyone. And the question isn't whether God speaks to us, it's whether we're listening. God speaks to us through three ordinary voices. And those are our needs, our talents, and our desires. And I'm just going to give like a brief definition of what these three mean in the book. So, God created you with fundamental needs. For example, if you don't eat, you will die or you will starve. Obviously, your stomach will hurt, but you feel the feeling that you need to eat. And so then you go grab some food and you eat. That is like a need that we have. And that is a voice, right? An internal voice that we don't even have to explain. We just immediately recognize. When you hear the voice of need, you're hearing the gentle voice of God guiding you towards what is essential for your well being. God speaks through us through your talents. God has endowed each individual with unique talents designed to help fulfill the mission He envisioned for you before time began. These talents guide you to each stage of your life, equipping you to carry out His will. So sometimes I feel like we don't think that we're talented at anything, or like, for example, like I remember growing up, Because I'd been held back in the second grade and I had a really hard time learning how to read. And some people in my family were like really hard on me. And I was only like in the second grade, but that's like a very impressionable time. I kind of internalized that I wasn't like a smart person. And I thought, I'm not smart. I'm not good at school. And I lived my life, even through college, thinking that I wasn't good at learning and that I was dumb. It wasn't until like I went through my spiritual awakening and I realized that I'd been like all of these things had been implanted by the way that people had treated me or the ways that I'd been bullied or the comments people had made about who they thought I was, and I totally had was holding on to those thoughts for dear life. And now I realize that like I'm not dumb. I'm actually I don't know if I would say that I'm smart, but I think that I'm smart. I think that I just learn differently. I think that my mind learns differently. I have ADHD, so for me to like really sit and think about things or for me to like really obsess about a certain topic, like I have to really, really be interested in it. But like, you know, but school, like if it's something that I don't like, then like I'm not really going to learn anything because like my interest hasn't been sparked. I actually really love to learn. And I think one of my talents is that when I really love a certain topic or I'm like consuming knowledge, like I'm really good at communicating what it is that I'm learning in a way that other people can process the information as well. Really taking inventory of the things that come naturally to us, but then also taking inventory of the things that maybe have been implanted in us that could be blocking our natural talents. And I think that that's really what the spiritual path is about, is like it's obviously a lot about learning, but it's also a lot about unlearning garbage that we learned from people that weren't thoughtful with us. The third way that God speaks through you is through your desires. God has placed a roaring flame of desire within you, a powerful force that can be harnessed for many purposes. As you listen to the voice of desire, you'll come to realize that there is one desire that stands above all others, one that aligns with God's greater plan for your life. Sometimes there's little seeds that come into our minds and we're like, oh, this is just like wishful thinking. Like, I remember a couple of years ago when I was starting my mental health journey, and I was like, one day I really want to start a podcast. And I felt really afraid and I was like, there's no way that I could like do that and who the heck would listen to me really doing it. But it started off with just this little thought that I had, and we all have those things. It's just being courageous and finding people that ignite it and like set it on fire and allow you to like dive into it, without like judgment. So these three voices, need, talent, and desire, will teach you many things. Above all, they will show you that God has been speaking to you your whole life. The more you listen, the clearer his voice becomes. And yeah, I think that with your intuition, I think that for a really long time when I was living in a lot of chaos, I didn't really trust myself and I surrounded myself with a lot of people that I felt had really hurt me. And I was like, maybe I don't have a good intuition because I'm not really good at reading people. But it really was because I really didn't trust myself. And I really didn't, when I would hear my intuition, I would always do something that was against it. And so the little volume kept going down and down and down until like I couldn't hear it anymore. The more you grow into like listening to that little voice, the stronger it gets. And then like, your intuition gets really, really strong where like I feel like my intuition is really strong now. When I listen to the voice of God and strive to follow his will, I am focused, energized, and invigorated. When I turn away from God or resist his counsel, I become distracted, depleted, and lethargic. My energy and enthusiasm is drained. Every time I read these books, I'm like, maybe I've known some of this stuff already. Have always said that the biggest source of currency for me is energy. And I always know when I'm not in the right place or I'm not around the right people because I feel drained. Like my energy is drained. I feel tired. I don't feel like I can be myself. It's like I'm up here and all of a sudden it's like woo. When I'm doing something that's not good for me. I think that at my lowest points when I've been most in the world and going off of my human senses, that's when I have felt the most depressed and the most lazy. And now that I've stepped into like fully following my intuition and following that voice that he's talking about, I feel like the most energized right now. Like my energy is like at its peak right now. Another thing is avoiding confusion and poor decisions. When I'm not listening to God, I often fall into the trap of listening to my own voice, or worse, allowing selfishness to take control. In this state, competing voices ping pong me back and forth, leaving me confused and overwhelmed. Listening to God's voice brings clarity, energy, and peace, guiding us through life's complexities. So, yeah, I think that when we are really in the world and we're not listening to our intuition, we're probably asking a lot of people for what we should do with our life. We're probably being kind of selfish and think it takes people hitting rock bottoms. I would like to not hit any more rock bottoms for me to know that I need to change. I want to welcome change without fear or without avoidance, because when I avoid things, those rock bottoms are really hard, even though I know that they're necessary. I wish that I would have listened to the whispers, you know? We're going to be talking about clarity. I think this is like one of my favorite words and something that I'm always looking for. Is personal clarity is a spiritual state of awareness that allows you to see clearly. Anything that brings you confusion means that you're not in a place of clarity. So, who you are, what you are here for, what truly matters, and what doesn't matter at all. It's the result of collaborating with the divine and firmly establishing your priorities, values, and goals. Personal clarity helps us live with purpose and intention. So, when you are living with clarity, you can go to bed knowing that you know who you are, why you are here, and what truly matters and what doesn't matter at all. And you know deep down why you're doing everything that you're doing. I think that if people understood that about clarity, then they would seek it out more. So, here are some questions that you can ask yourself to know if you are living in clarity. These are 5 questions that he says that everybody should answer. And the more clear that you can get on each of these questions, then the more purposeful your life is. And if you don't have an answer to these questions, that's okay. Maybe you've never even asked yourself these questions. So the questions are: who am I? What am I here for? Where am I going? What matters most? And what matters least? And here are just his answers. If you relate, I really related to his answers. And who am I? You're a child of God, uniquely and wonderfully made. That's it. That's who you are. Not your titles, you're not your money, you're not your like the boyfriend that you're dating. You first are a child of God and you are perfectly uniquely wonderfully made. I think that's such a beautiful answer because a lot of people don't know who they are. And I know that feeling of like I don't even know who I am. And finally realizing that you are a child of the universe and that you're here for a purpose, I think can be like a really freeing feeling. What am I here for? You are here to love God and your neighbor. God has assigned you a specific mission that allows you to do this while becoming all that He created you to be. What am I here for? I really like that question and I really like his answer because I think that overall we really are here to love something outside of our humanity. And if you are the highest in your world, then you're always going to suffer. And if you can look up and realize that there's something out there taking care of you, guiding you, and that you're here to follow the guidance of that higher power, then you start to invite direction. I do believe that we live in a time where obviously there's a lot of social media and a lot of envy culture where we see the best of people and maybe these extravagant lives, or we think that success is only for a few, you know, like if you're a lawyer or a doctor or like have all these degrees or you have a lot of money. And so you're like, well, I don't have like a mission or a purpose, or I'm not here to really change the world. A couple months ago, I came to this understanding that I'm not very extraordinary and that that's like okay. And that I don't have to like keep looking to be extraordinary so that other people tell me that I'm great. I have a mission and my mission is mine. I think that my purpose here is to like seek goodness and to try to be a decent person and to learn and to grow. And don't think that my purpose is to be like extraordinary anymore. And that there comes like a peace with that. I think that I'm here to be tolerant of others and learn from other people and grow with other people. Yeah, I don't really think that my purpose here is to really be, you know, liked anymore. I think that for a long time I thought that I needed people to like me. And now I realize I'm like, I don't need people to like me anymore. I don't even like everybody. But I know that I'm here to be good to people in whichever way that I can. My intention is never to be to hurt anyone. And I think that that's why we're all here. I think that we're all here to be like genuinely good to each other. I think that it's like a conscious choice to not be selfish. Third question is, where am I going? So he says that we're on a pilgrimage, a sacred journey to a sacred destination. Your destination is God in heaven for eternity. If you ask somebody else, like, where am I going? They're probably going to tell you that they're going to their next big goal and their next success story and their next whatever. I personally now I totally understand his answer of my destination being God, because for a long time I really did feel like I was lost and I didn't feel this peace that I feel now. And I think that even though I have many earthly goals, I think that my main goal it will always be to reach the heavens in some kind of way, but knowing that I'm super flawed and like learning from those things so that yeah, I can continue to feel the fullness and this peace that I feel now. Fourth question he asked is, what matters most? He says, people were made to be loved and things were made to be used. If that isn't the truth, people were made to be loved and things were made to be used. But we're living in a time where we love things and we use people. I don't know. That's like a really big question that I like to ponder on because I think it makes me really sad. I still will always want to have fun and I'm always going to be a fun girl. But there's a balance that I feel like I have now. And when I was living around people and everybody was looking for fun all the time and everybody just wanted to find that next high, I just saw a lot of darkness that I wish I could unsee because I felt like there's a lot of people that are using each other. At the end of the day, like always made me feel really empty inside. And so, what matters most is that eternal world, that feeling of wholeness. And that's not something that anybody can give you. Not a person, not a thing, not an accomplishment. A relationship that you have to cultivate on your own that takes genuine intentionality to get there. Because who you become is infinitely more important than what you do, have, accomplish, or buy. So at the end of your life, can you ask yourself, like, I like the person that I was and genuinely believe that? And then the last question he asked is, what matters least? Anything that becomes an obstacle between you and God, between you and loving others, and between you and your God given mission, your purpose. I feel like now that I have gotten really clear on what matters to me, I feel like my confidence is at the highest it's ever been. I think that I have always been really willing to walk away from people that aren't good for me or that things that I feel like are not leading me in the right path. I know that can be really hard for people. They kind of get stuck on people that are toxic, connections that aren't good for them, or know that I have fully stepped into that relationship with my highest self. I really can walk away from anything that feels misaligned or anything that's bringing me back to like a dark place, or anything that's bringing me back to like a toxic relationship. I really can walk away from anything that feels misaligned or anything that's bringing me back to like a dark place, or anything that's bringing me back to like a toxic relationship. I really can walk away from anything that feels misaligned or anything that's bringing me back to like a dark place, or anything that doesn't reciprocate mutual understanding. I'm totally okay with walking away to conserve my peace and my purpose moving forward. Anything that wants to stay in chaos, I realized it doesn't really matter in the end. It's just like kind of wasting time. Those are the 5 questions that you should ask yourself. And if you can answer those clearly, then you're living a life in clarity. Like I said, this is all like everybody's on their own journey. There's no right. You haven't missed a train. There is no train. This is your life, and you can make a decision to turn around or make a left or make a right whenever you want. If it took you some time, if you get there at 26 or if you get there at 37 or if you get there at 56, it doesn't really matter as long as you just like do it. As you get better at answering life's big questions clearly and concisely, you become really good at something most people struggle with, which is saying no. Learning to say no to things that are too small for you, things that don't align with your purpose, is key to personal growth. As you master the art of saying no, you become more decisive. This is no small achievement. It's the beginning of becoming a great decision maker. So, clarity leads to engagement. It's impossible to be truly engaged and happy if you are disengaged. The problem for many people is that they don't fully understand the true purpose and value of what they're doing. As an example of the miserable worker, they may believe the purpose of their job is simply to make money and they wouldn't be alone. Millions of people think they go to work just to earn a paycheck. While making money to sustain ourselves and support our families is noble and right, it isn't enough to make work fulfilling. Whether you're making $14 an hour or 400,000 a year. I really liked this example because like every book that I read kind of resonates with something that I'm going through, lesson that I'm either closing or processing. It always feels very aligned. I've been really pondering on like engagement and the purpose of work. I totally understood what he was saying because this is just like a moment that of something that I just recently found clarity on. So when I moved back to DC, I my contract with my last job had ended and I was basically unemployed, and then my mom got sick and I really wasn't able to like find full-time work. And so this time last year actually, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go get, like a retail job. Honestly, I went into that job with like a little bit of ego, been steadily working like a salary job, and all of a sudden, like I'm, working this retail job, totally felt kind of embarrassed. And I was like, I went in with a little bit of ego, and I think that during this period where I really needed this job, that I was helping take care of my mom, a lot of things came up for me that I really needed to work through because when I was starting this job, I was like, I need to go into this part time work as a source of character development. And I remember thinking that last year. And it's so funny to see this in this book. It really reflected on my old jobs and what it was that I didn't like and what kind of attitude I went into every single job. And I realized that with every job I went into, I would go into it as like a means to an end. The job that I went to was like, oh, well, I just need to make money. And I would also go into every job being like, well, this isn't my dream job, but eventually, like, this is just like, a bridge to like the actual job that's gonna like actually make me happy. Found myself like really miserable at every job because I didn't find it fulfilling and I didn't find it purposeful. It was like an energy that I was going into each job. You know what I mean? And so I felt drained at everyone that I went into. This job that I started last year, to be conscious, like if I go into this part time job feeling like I'm too good for it and I don't need to work that hard because it's only a means to an end until I find my full time job, I'm going to do the same thing at the next job because like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And at the same time, I'd been learning about, I have a blog post about Saint Joseph, and he is a healthy masculine father figure who teaches you about discipline and mastering your craft and finding love and joy in like the work that you do. And I feel like the more that I learned about him, the more I evolved at this part-time job. And like, I realized that I needed to go into work not for the purpose of this being like just a means to an end of like, I just need to make money. Like, this is just a part-time thing. But like, how could I go in purposeful and joyfully and like be grateful that I was at that job, even if it was only for a few hours and it was a small check? If I couldn't be grateful for this small check, like, I wasn't going to be grateful for like a big check at a full-time job. And so I've been at this job for about a year. My mom is finally in a good place, and I'm starting to look for full-time work again. And I think that my character developed so much within the year that I was working at this retail store, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt really happy to like go in and to work hard, and I felt my energy just totally shift when I made the conscious choice of like going in with the purpose of being nice to be around, um to learn from my peers even if they were younger, and if I felt like I'd been at jobs that like didn't compare to this job. Like I went in with more humility. Making money is secondary. It's necessary, but not the main reason we work. The primary purpose of work is that it helps you become a better version of yourself. Working hard, striving for excellence, paying attention to the details, and serving others joyfully all transform you into a better human being. The true value of work lies in how it helps you develop your character, and character is destiny. This is what he's trying to say, is that clarity leads to engagement, is that I enjoyed this part-time job much more than I ever did those other jobs. I wasn't engaged. I wasn't there to like grow as an individual and see how I could learn from my peers and interact with them in a way that made me feel involved, because I always felt like, well, the next one's actually going to be the one that makes me happy. When you live like that, you live like a mediocre person. And I personally don't want to be mediocre. Anything that I do, even if it's like a podcast for 5 people or for like a million people, like I want to make sure that everything that I do now is purposeful and intentional. And anything that I put my name to, that I can say that I'm proud of, that I put my all into it. You know what I mean? Character of someone who refuses to work hard, settles for mediocrity in everything, neglects the details of their work, and begrudgingly serves others. He says that character is destiny. Character shapes your destiny, but beyond that, there is a higher purpose and calling to work. Work is also a form of prayer. Each hour of work, when offered to God for a specific person or intention, has infinite value or power. Most people have never been taught to approach work in this way. Meanwhile, each new generation entering the workforce demands more intrinsic meaning from their work, all while being completely unaware of their own inability to infuse their work with profound meaning. Watching someone be deeply immersed in their work is captivating. That's engagement. And engagement is attractive and it's inspiring, but also rare for humans to be fully engaged all the time. Because, life is full of many directions and making it difficult to focus completely on one thing. And that's okay, because listening to the voice of God brings piercing clarity and massive engagement. So when you're living in your path of alignment with your true self, that's how you'll know, because you're deeply clear about what it is that you want and you're deeply engaged. And again, when you're listening to the voice of God, you're focused, you're energized, and you're invigorated. So, will you listen? One of the fastest ways to improve any relationship is to become a good listener. He talks about the listening gap and how 96% of people believe they are good listeners. However, research shows we only retain 50% of what we hear. This gap leads to misunderstandings, disagreement, and frustration. Our confidence in our listening skills, fueled by pride, often make us even worse listeners. Like now, when I know that I'm engaging with somebody who's not listening to me, I can always tell. I can tell in their eyes. I can tell, like, just by the way that they're speaking to me, that they're not listening to understand me. Once you get clear on the spiritual path and you really get that veil off, you really start seeing people and you stop engaging with like nonsense. Like I can tell now when I'm talking to somebody and they're totally not there. Like nothing that I say is actually being penetrated through their brain. So I just disengage and I don't engage with those kinds of people because I'm looking for reciprocity with people who are seeking to understand, and that it's not about just their interest. The art of listening. Listening is an art, and humility is its foundation. It's easy to question whether God speaks to us, but the real question is, will I listen? First step in listening. Before we can listen to God's voice, we must learn to listen to the ordinary voices in our lives. What he's saying is that for you to become good at listening to like the higher voice, first you have to become more engaged and be able to listen to like the immediate obvious stuff. Like, are you actually listen to understand, or are you listening for your own self-interest? Two truths about listening. Most people don't have even one person who listens to them deeply. Everybody loves a good listener. Why aren't we better listeners? Obviously, the busyness about life. We live in a really busy world. Self focus. Honestly, a lot of it's just we're selfish. Most of us are consumed with our own thoughts, what we want to say next, or how the conversation impacts us. If we can't even listen to the people that are immediate to us, then we're probably not going to listen to our higher self, because our higher self requires the art of obedience. And obedience is one of the least popular words in our modern time because it often triggers negative reactions because we associate it with submitting to authority or carrying out the commands of a superior. Many people have been traumatized by overbearing, controlling individuals, causing the concept of obedience to feel like a threat to personal freedom. But the root of the word obedience, he says, tells a different story. It originates from the Latin verb obedir, meaning to deeply listen or to listen deeply. When you listen deeply, we gain fuller understanding of why we are being guided to certain actions. The more we understand, the easier it becomes to carry out what is being asked of us. Deep listening fosters clarity and alignment, transforming obedience from mere compliance to purposeful action. Challenges of obedience in today's world: there's a lack of wise counsel. Most people do not seek or value wisdom, are uncoachable and unwilling to change or grow. They make choices that lead to self-destruction. That is, and that is so true. Like, I have met so many people that is like talking to a rock, and I've learned to just mind my business because like I've learned to like know my audience. There's some people who are open to wisdom, and I'm not saying that I'm wise, but like I feel like wisdom will come to you in different ways, and people will come and say something to you that sparks like a thought. But most people are so stubborn, and again, they want to do what they want to do, and so they go down the path because they think that they know what's best. But what I've learned in my healing process is that I know nothing, and that like even when I think I know something, I know nothing, and I'm always seeking knowledge. And I think that what wisdom comes from a higher source. If we want to avoid those really deep rock bottoms, then we need to seek higher counsel or wise counsel, and that is through like talking to God. Because like if you talk to God and tell him like I don't know what it is that I'm doing, I don't know what direction to go to, like, he will send you the answers, but you have to be humble enough to listen to it, but process it and then step on that answer. And it might not always be what we want. Like if you feel an immediate no, why is that? Is that like your pleasures like telling you like no, like I shouldn't go down that path because like I'm still very much enjoying this side of this world because I like living in the overindulgence of certain things. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like sometimes people aren't ready to let go of the illusions, and so even though they know that some another path could be better for them, they still want to simmer in the sauce of chaos, and you have to let them be there. Resistance to higher guidance. Many are uninterested in connecting with the higher power or source of wisdom. A self obsessed culture. Obedience goes beyond normal humility and listening, but in our self obsessed society, most people want to do whatever they want, and many can't be convinced of reason, let alone wisdom. I'm coming to the end of this topic in this chapter, and I hope that you guys liked it. So, what is listening to God? Listening to God requires an open heart, ready to receive His guidance, and calls us to set aside our personal preferences and agendas. It involves letting go of our stubborn and prideful desire to do whatever we want. Listening to God demands humility and willingness to be shaped by His wisdom. Above all, listening to God is an act of surrender, a choice to trust in His plan over our own. Will you listen? I love ending with that because there's been many times where I haven't been ready to listen and I still wanted to be where I wanted to be. And now that I feel like I've fully surrendered, I feel just the best I've ever felt. And it's like, be curious. I think that people aren't curious enough. So learn more, read more, and be open to the signs that are constantly being sent to you because they're there. You just have to be conscious enough to catch them. So I hope you guys leave a little more inspired. Stay tuned for the next episode where I'll go into chapter 2 of this beautiful book. And I hope that you guys find this information as insightful as I did. So bye, guys.